Who inspires you? What sustains you? A simple conversation with my beautiful friend will always make my heart pound.
Very smart. So anyway, this is my mother. So her name, she was born Anita Adrienne Henriette Queriou. So her father was a French from France settler who moved from Algeria to Canada.
Wow.
And this is my mother's best friend, whose name is Neva. And Neva passed about this time last year. And we live in a building that it's a Samuel McClure designed mansion that's been converted to a senior's residence, and it's Neva worked undercover in the Second World War when this property was still 5 acres in size. It's been downsized many times to sustain the building, but she lived in this building. She lived here as with 240 some other women in the Air Force, and they worked undercover monitoring the traffic along the West Coast.
Oh,
And
wow.
here I've got both of them. I have my mother here and Neva, who lived here. It feels really incredible. So they always sit and watch me. I put them there. Hang on.
Oh, wow. Well, sit and watch me. And this is my grandparents I grew up with.
I remember reading about you
Yeah.
and your grandparents.
Yeah, they got so much wisdom, and it's all the experience that I childhood memories are about them.
Oh,
With them.
Yeah.
I come from the land of water. My hometown, it's 100% groundwater supplies, and thousands of years, and even last 400 years, human interventions continuing, and today keep the sustainability of the clean, pure water.
Right. So what's the name of the city? What's the name?
Kumamoto. So I grew up with anything to do with all the rituals with waters, writing about waters, schools, save water practices.
Wow.
It's just a part of a way of life. And obviously the quality water, the drink, everything you open, the tap water is a spring water.
Wow.
You can taste it.
It's sacred. It's sacred.
Yeah. And water is life. And also in Japan, we always say that the energy resides in everything. So that's where I'm coming from. And then I happened to learn about Michael Blackstock, who is indigenous artist / scientist sustainability, who bringing idea of blue ecology to connecting indigenous wisdom, that water is life, and also science, whole approach.
Yeah, it's the way of the future.
Yeah. And often these messages are not forefront, but how can we make it more visible? And also, so therefore people start looking into more connecting to nature, more using the 5 senses.
And I have a feeling that we're more reliant on the technology. We're missing stuff. We no longer navigate by the stars. How many people can spell? Who can do math in their head? You know, we've externalized all of this. And I think what you're saying about your elders is something that like what in land-based learning, where schools are doing land-based learning, kids are learning to use their body and their experience to learn science and math, and that's an embodied learning, right? Whereas what I did when I was studying plant science was memorizing. And you know, we all know that when you do something, you have many ways to access that information again, rather than just through your mind. But I mean, when we look at, like you're saying, architecture, and we look at mathematics, and we look at navigation, all of these things that were part of how we survived and the essential pieces, then you know, I don't know, I really wonder about our future as we, since we spoke last, I set out to not in here. I didn't do this in here, but I did it in here. To digitalize the three main women's traditional handwork that were done by Indigenous women. So beading is one of them. That's the beading one. And but before beads, Indigenous women used quills, porcupine quills, for embellishment. You may already know this. Do you know this stuff?
No.
Okay, so they before the colonists arrived, Indigenous people embellished their clothing and their gear, like for their animals, and it not only was in a form of embellishment, but it was a reflection of who they were, what community, what nation they belonged to, what their internal world, what was going on in their internal world. So sometimes they would, on their moccasins, they would have some kind of image that would reflect back to them something that they were trying to embody. So it's spiritual, I guess. And so they used quills, porcupine quills, and they used seeds, and they also used moose tufting to create these embellishments. So I have just now completed, I have this is the beading one where I'm using photographs of berries. I also have created a quill work version where I've photographed in a very specific copywritten technique quills, and I'm using that in my work. And then most recently, with the funding from the First Peoples Cultural Council, they're doing really amazing work in arts, in language, and music. I have used moss, which is one of the first plants, algae, then it became moss on land. I have used photographs of moss that mimic this moose tufting technique. So now I have these three techniques that are all scalable. So this version, each individual berry can be enlarged to the size of your head. And the quills can be enlarged to 40 inches long, and the moss similarly. So now I have these tools that I'm going to use to make art, and I hope, my hope is that I can use this, I can attach it to the values that are really important for me personally, the ones that I've learned, passed on to me from my mother, about generosity, about taking only what you need, sharing what you've got, protecting the environment, because my mom was an environmentalist, and building community through the gifts that we have. So I don't really know where that's going to go, but I think that these are powerful tools to work with.
Yes.
Yeah. I was hoping to set up a whole slideshow for you, but so there's a little story. I'll start with this. So basically, this is a Métis sash. It's a sort of a non-typical one, and it's woven using your fingers, right? It's a finger. There's no loom, and it's typical of a certain type of arrow Métis sash, and it was made by my late friend who died at 92, just before COVID. So my work, and I'm going to spin through something here. My work was inspired by that piece, and as well, this is the use of quill works. This is a bonnet that was made by a Lakota artist, 1800s, 1900, yeah.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So these are quills. They stitched with quills. So porcupine quills. My work is this one. Okay, so basically, these I just wanted to show you how that technique of the traditional porcupine quills translates to what for me is a contemporary interpretation of that.
Wow.
So each of these little stripes in there, these will be banners that are going to be shown in a show in Montreal in the fall. So the wider banners they're going to be they'll be hung from a cedar dowel, and they're going to 12 feet on each side. So that's about 4 meters on each side from ceiling to floor, and they're printed on silk. And the wider ones are 16 inches wide, and the narrower ones are 10. So what this is about is, you know, I don't come from privilege, and at times in my life, like many people, I have had a lot of difficulty, and I've leaned into nature, and I've really been attached to conifers, to trees, and imagined that there was a tree inside me. And then I was flexible. I could move just like a tree would move. I could balance myself. I was rooted. And at times I would just sit and look out the window at trees, and I was that tree, and it was holding me as I struggled. So
what a beautiful imageries.
So that's what, and also cedar trees, like of the sacred medicines, there's cedar, sweetgrass, tobacco, and sage. And so this represents the cedar tree, and represented in different colors, and the braided portion is the sweetgrass.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, and it's blue because the indigenous person who, before Linnaeus, who set up that structured system of classification of plants, that had been done by an indigenous person who was very attuned to the plants. It wasn't something that was overlaid, but in communication with the plants, they identified these plants, or this person did. And that person is often represented with blue hair. So I've given this a blue braid.
Wow. Original, the sash that your friends weaved at the beginning that shows there's a arrow shape in it. Do you think the arrow represents?
I think it's symbolic. It was an indigenous symbol. You know, it was a Métis symbol. Métis were plains people, and they were buffalo hunters.
Maybe the hunting arrows.
Yeah, it would be the hunting arrows. Yeah, and it was, my ancestry is Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and then most recently Métis in the Red River area of Manitoba, what's now known as Manitoba. But yeah.
Wow.
Ojibwe.
Ojibwe, the woman who wrote Water Walker for children's book.
Okay.
Based on the true story.
Oh, that's beautiful. Ojibwe grandmother.
Yeah, I was very touched by her story, and she really feel like we have to do something for the environment. So that's what she did.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get it because I have some young friends coming, and they have young kids, and I was thinking, what indigenous book could I get these kids? So there we are. There's my answer. I'll get it. Thank you for that.
No.
Yeah.
But your work, it's so beautiful visually too. I just look at the colors and the shapes, and
it's very experimental, Keiko, and highly technical. I don't do this alone. I work with a team of technicians, and we do it together. And it is so detailed, and I'm very, very obsessive about the details. Many iterations, and you can see here some of these are woven, the background's woven, because I wanted to just sort of play with the idea of weaving basketry.
yeah.
And
I see that so much details, and
my idea was I wanted to create like a forest, but that feeling, it's going to be printed on silk, and they'll move when people walk by, and then they're going to be accompanied by a series of spirals that go from ceiling to floor.
Oh, wow.
And on those spirals, my intention, and this is just underway, and I'll tell you a bit about this. I wanted to talk about volatile organic compounds and the oxygen carbon dioxide exchange that happens between people and plants.
Yes.
I've had the great good fortune through my sister-in-law, who used to run a scanning electron microscope. She just put me in touch with a professor at University of Victoria who runs the scanning electron microscope here. So tomorrow, her name is Elaine Humphrey, and she is a scientist. She runs that microscope, and she is going to get a sample ready, and we're going to do a photo shoot together where she'll be running the microscope through, and I will both be in Zoom, and I'll be saying, okay, can you take a picture here? Can you take a picture there? Because I want to look at the stomata, the little breathing holes on the leaves of cedar. And then I hope to be able to use that for the surface designs of these spirals.
Wow, I just finished teaching at the SFU, the social artistry course.
Okay,
And
yeah.
one of the things I always use metaphors, the spiral that are found in nature everywhere. Conco spiral, which is the spiral, but the floor projection is the golden spiral. So like the shape of the like a stone or shape of the like a shell.
Yeah,
And human and nature are not separate.
No.
Together is movements together.
Right. The connection, not just between people, but within ourselves and also between nature and humans.
Yeah. Universally, the spiral is a symbol of resilience.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that.
Double strand gene.
Yes.
The spiral.
The double helix.
Yeah.
How can we identify in ourselves? Like my mother decided to die. She said, "I'm tired. I want to throw in the towel." And so we brought the doctor in, and the doctor, she said, "Do you want to know how to do this?" And my mother said, "Yes." I'm going to stop sharing this thing. There we are. So she said, "Stop eating and stop drinking, and in 3 weeks or 4, you will die." So that's what my mom did. My mom had been a 45-year practitioner of yoga. And right until the end, I mean, I have these phenomenal pictures of my mother in yoga postures and her cane right beside her. But, doing the plow and doing forward bend. But what she traveled back and forth, Keiko. She traveled back and forth between the two worlds. It was like unbelievable. People were drawn to her. And she would leave and she'd come back and she'd say, "I saw Papa, her father." And she said, "I was wrong about him, Daphne. I now see what a good person he was." And she would tell me what he did, how he served the community. She said, "I sat on his knee and he's waiting for me now." And so then she would say things like, she would say, "Daphne, never forget this. Please always remember, we're all one. I see that we're all one," and another time she said, "Look for the beauty in everything. Just look for the beauty in everything." And she came back, I've got them all written down, but I'm trying about that. We're all one business. I'm really trying to see the world through that light, and particularly the natural world, which we have become so divorced from, right? So I think that's what you're saying is in part. These spirals that I'm working for are volute spirals, so they're modeled after the snail. But yeah, anyway.
Thank you for sharing the beautiful story. And you are witnessing her departure so closely. Amazing. I have a similar experience with my mom. When 2019, even though I wasn't there at my hometown, but we were able to talk like this through the phone.
Yeah.
And so her life motto was give joy to others. And she was always smiling. She was a nurse all her life. And after retire, she connected her childhood passion, which is always dancing and ballet and Hawaiian dance. And so she danced for everybody throughout. And she was dying from the gastric cancer.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And yet, all of us, all of our relatives and families, we got the courage from her because to the last minute, she was calm. She was very so forgiving. It's just
she was at peace,
very peace. And I asked her many times, "Mom, I'm just scared," but then she wasn't. The last minute, she was giving reassurance to everybody, and that's what I want to be. Showing that I think she's connected to, as like your mom, that I don't know, something really mighty things. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that like my mom, like my sister's a yoga teacher, and my mom, Shavasana is the corpse pose in yoga, and it's often done at the end of a series of asanas. And Wendy said, "Mom, let's breathe together. Let's just do the Shavasana breathing." And she breathed my mom out. That's how my mom died. She left this world. And so it was very, very beautiful. And like I think what you're saying is probably might be able to be summed up like this: your mom not only taught you how to live, but she taught you how to die potentially, right?
Yes, yes.
And that's really a beautiful gift.
And that your mom is the pinnacle of her life, summoned up every wisdom and power and determination and love. That's so beautiful.
She was also incredibly funny right to the end. Like, I mean, there was a big mirrored closet on the other side of her bed, and I was on the other side of her bed, and I was all roiled up. I would feel so, just, you know how you feel this, because it's been on for weeks, and I'd look up and I'd see myself laughing, and I'd think, what's going on here? But it was because she was entertaining me. You know, she was being so funny right to the end that, you know, here's my mom dying and she's making me laugh. So it was when on her passing that all this work started coming through me, you know, that it was and it's mysterious. I don't understand it. I'm going with it, you know. And I'm fortunate because, you know, I'm 67 next month.
It's an age things to say you defy age completely.
I couldn't afford to do this. I couldn't afford to make these works if it weren't for the First Peoples Cultural Council or Canada Council. This work would not be happening. It wouldn't. It's impossible. So, you know, yahoo to the taxpayers of Canada who contribute to these wonderful grants that support artists.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of the time. I'm not art educated, Keiko. You know, I'm a smart person, but I don't have an MFA or, you know, I'm not educated that way. But if had this been 5 or 10 years ago, this would never be happening, never. Because the whole idea about art being embedded in education and the European colonial idea of art.
Yes.
I'd shown my work in galleries. I don't have the background. You know, how would I end up getting funded?
Your work is stunning, and no one else is doing it, you know?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I acknowledge that the work is unique.
And it's very deep, it's very personal, and yet it connects lots of people's, you know, because your personal inquiry can be shared with so many others.
Like for me, you know, I'm quite a spiritual person. I have a deep connection to my inner world. For the pluses and minuses that come with that, right? Because sometimes your inner world can give you a fair degree of challenges. But anyway, but I feel as though something has come to me and is moving through me, and I make the works mine by doing the hard work of creating them. But I don't know where these ideas come from. It's not something that I set out to plot. You know, it's not like that at all. It is, you know, they come to me and I see them, and then I work really, really hard to make them. And in the process, I'm changed, and the works emerge, and the works are tied to story. The story becomes much more richer because I'm researching stuff and reading and gathering information from many sources, and hopefully building community, you know, like with you, and tomorrow with Elaine Humphreys on that scanning electron microscope. That I think that that there's potential for all of us to change, and that's what we need. We need that change. We need to see each other in respectful ways, and there's so much healing that not just Indigenous people need, but all of us need to really work with ourselves. I mean, we're in a very challenging time in the history of this planet, you know, and it's essential that we all address what's ahead of us, I think, in one way or another, you know.
I got a little bit goosebumps. I really resonate, and I hear from also an Indigenous artists, like you were like that,
Mhm.
messengers that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's like, I'm sure other artists experience, it's not just indigenous. I don't know, but I hunch that many artists have that experience. I don't
Mhm.
know, what is it that we're tapping into? I have no idea. Why is it that we're chosen? No idea,
Mhm.
but it's if we're privileged enough to have the resources and the skills and the time to
Yes.
pursue these inquiries, I think there's rich outcome. I think
Yeah.
that the curiosity and the widening the circle, if we're able to avoid rigidity or chaos, because those two pieces are, they make the production very hard. But if
Mhm.
we're able to remain congruous with ourselves and with our image, and have the resources, I think there's that's what we need. And I'm an older person. I worry about the young artists who are starting out and who are living on $19,000 a year.
Mhm.
I think about, if we really want to foster this kind of work, I think of the importance of like a guaranteed annual income,
Yeah.
or what about housing? What do artists need so they can make their work? What's prohibiting them? And
Mhm.
to bring, like you're doing, to bring the material to the community. It's not just, I grew up in northern Saskatchewan. I was always making things. Had somebody have come in and engaged with me and given me the tools of creating and helped me foster that conversation with myself, I think my life would have taken a different course.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm thinking about when I think about the art not just being prisoner to galleries and to in wealthy homes, but to actually be taken to the
Yeah.
communities where there are budding artists. And if we give them the tools and say, here, let's work with this and let's see what you can create and tell your story in the process.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. I feel so reassured. Not only
Hmm.
that I'm inspired, but everything you said, um, that's exactly we all need. And here you are. But in today's life is so many disruptions.
Mhm.
People phone right next to. With that environment, how people can even focus more?
Focus. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I certainly, there's a book. I just attended a really wonderful series on connection. Guy's name is Johan Hari, I think his name is. He wrote a book about exactly that. Gabor Mate was in on this. Do you know who Gabor Mate is?
Yes.
Yeah, so he was in on this conference as well. So this fellow, whose name is Johan Hari,
Mhm.
he's written a lot about addiction, which
Mhm.
is very prevalent, as you know, on the streets of the cities that we live in here. Less so where I come from in Montreal, because
Mhm.
it's too cold for people to spend all 4 seasons on the street. But
Mhm.
Johan was talking about this disruption in our nervous system. So that's kind of what I mean when I say rigidity or chaos. The
Mhm.
chaos, I think, is that the dopamine hits, and
Mhm.
how we're searching and unable to settle our minds, how we're
Yeah.
and rigidity is equally as challenging, because
Yes.
there's no possibility for movement or change there, or little. And I
Yes.
think that's look what's happening, with the convoy, with the anti-maskers, and there's a rigidity there.
Mhm.
But if we can get to the basis of understanding what are the unmet needs of these people, they're behaving in this way. How can we see them as we are one, we're all one? And
Mhm.
are they being left behind?
Mhm.
Have they fallen through the cracks? Not to say that there isn't evil in the world, but
Mhm.
often I think those rigid behaviors come from a point of hurt,
Yes.
um, and to try and mask it doesn't free us up as a culture.
Yes.
It just pushes it underground, and then it pops up over here.
No, it's so true, and you beautifully, gently teaching all of us. And I love that give tools people, but not what to make, but it's up to them. But
Mhm.
we need to give as resources as possible, on the premise that we have all right to be to free and to express and to exist and to be heard without being prescribed.
So that's something I'd like to do, and I'm hoping to get some resources to do that. Like I'm preparing files for print on paper so that I can take these things into workshops and even do them virtually if COVID. We have to prepare for COVID, right? Not
Yes.
We have to see it as being part of our future, because I think it is going to be,
Yes.
and anyone who's more vulnerable won't be able to travel, or will have to do risk assessment. When I think about those children who live in northern Saskatchewan, where I lived, where there was a drought of creation, and in my childhood, it may not be the case now, but we know what happens to education, to art education in schools. It's like psychotherapy, art education, physical education, they get axed, right? So to think about the idea of having artworks that can travel to communities, even if they're just photographs of the original artwork, and then to have a kit that these can be taken into schools, and where children can begin to develop their what's the word for this? A visual voice.
Yes.
So give them the tools to express themselves and honor their joint creations together. Then I think that's, for me, that's a way forward.
I can't agree with you more. That's what we needed. And the education system right now, there's no room.
How do there's a life force. How do we tap into that life force and just keep it going? Like, stoke that life force, in a positive way, so that to build resilience.
Yeah, you are showing us that through your work, and I can already feel, even listening to you, I got lifetime dose of wisdom. Really, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And maybe it also is a way to, like a lot of these very detailed techniques are ways to, I don't even know how to say this because I don't even like this word, but to regulate ourselves, right? To that whole thing about how we read other people's faces, and how the empathy, and how we feel a sense of connection together. And if one person's regulated, then they can help the other person to find regulation.
Like a mirror gene or something.
Yes, that's it. That's the word. Yeah. And but some of these very detailed techniques, like beading traditionally, or quill work, some of these, they were very Zen activities, right?
Yes.
And as somebody who, I'm a meditator, it's just part of my life. I believe in this stuff. I believe that in our capacity to heal ourselves and to heal together. So it's really has to do with the wellness of all of us, and not just of one individual. And I think maybe creating together can bring that sense of belonging, which is pretty important.
Yes.
And a joint voice, but I don't know how to get there. If you got any good ideas, share them, because I don't know.
You start with one, and you're already influencing, but your work speaks. You have the beautiful visions and balance. What balance that we need in this world, and you were showing that to us.
Well, I hope that when we talk about legacy, for me, my legacy is not so much the art, but it's the relationships that that are fostered through the art. And by that, I mean, with my colleagues, my co-creators, and I work with a young woman named Lena Samakova, and we've been working together for 6 years. And we have worked online since 2017, so COVID didn't really interrupt our work. But when we talk a lot about being in regulation, we talk that is part of the conversation. And what does she want? What does she? Because eventually she will leave this project. So what is it that she wants to learn? And then I try and set her up with use my grant money for train her in something she wants to learn to do. And where the focus between us is really on being well, is being, I'll say to her, she had COVID recently, and I'll say, Lena, I want 70% of your energy, no more. Don't spend any more than that. And she says, okay, deal. But you stick to that too. Okay?
Wow, that's difficult.
Deal. Okay, deal. I'm a hypocrite. I know I'm a terrible hypocrite. But younger people keep you honest, don't they? In a way that older people don't.
Yes. Wow, definitely. Whoever work with you, they're luckiest people. I can tell.
Well, you don't know. I can be a royal pain in the ass too, by just being so demanding and so precise. And I say that, but I really, when I talk about a legacy, I think about that. I think about, what could be more powerful, and then people coming away feeling respected and feeling as though their life matters, and that their learning and their inquiry is valued. That is way more value than, I pay them what I can. I pay them more than minimum wage, and I don't pay myself even, but and I try in any way to work with Indigenous artists when I can. But many of the people who I work with are like me. They don't come from privilege. I think that the values we share, even in the production, down to the production, our technology is like third world technology. And by virtue of not being from privilege, I think our expectations are different, and we understand the importance of reliance on each other in a way that I think might be lost in situations where people have more privilege and more sense of what's that word? Entitlement, yeah.
Interdependence is the way to survive. And I come from culture exactly that. So I have to really embrace that relationship is the most important thing. Yeah.
To think about, what parts of us served us well in this life, and what parts of us held us back, Not everybody's willing to answer those questions. And how well, because obviously the person's living on, what are there in what ways are they trying to work with the things that have held us back? And that might be like on forgiveness, for example, and to ask, it could be forgiveness, it could be healing, it could be, chronic illness, or what could have made a difference, because that's kind of going forward. It helps both seed the question in the individual and acknowledges that, I have, for example, resentments or whatever, but what would it take to resolve that? In this lifetime, what would it take? So, just that kind of that softening the heart part, and what tools do you have to work with that? It's not a bad thing to bring those things into focus at this time of our lives. And it's also a good thing, I think, for younger people to realize that older people, they haven't come to the end. Their lives are ongoing. They're still working on things. They're still wanting to engage with themselves and with others. And then the question about how could that be supported? Then maybe, other older people would think, well, what would I need to overcome these hurdles in my life,
Yes.
I don't know. It's just an idea.
No, you're helping me so much. Wow. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, look at that sweet kitty cat.
Yeah, lunchtime.
Okay. All right. So I've taken enough of your time, but this is...
No, thank you. Thank you, Daphne. It was such a dose of vitamins a day. Thank you.
Well, you know what, Keiko? Reach out to me, okay?
I will.
I'm on your side. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Daphne.
Okay, so big hug and...
Yes.
Okay, so just be in touch with whatever you need or want, and we'll talk more.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Daphne. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.